to Test This, the podcast designed to help software testers understand risk and adopt new testing solutions with ease and confidence. Your host is Mahamadou, a quality assurance consultant with over 10 years of experience across multiple industries. In each episode, he'll talk to different experts and learn from them about how they test.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm happy to welcome Ady Stokes. Ady is a well-known tester and accessibility advocate with over 20 years of experience. He's the author of the guide Sample Test for Accessibility Every Tester Should Know. He is a Minister of Testing ambassador and public speaker. He delivered talk in many workshops with Test Bash, Nordic Testing Days event. He also manages both MOT certificates, Software Testing Essentials, and Software Quality Engineering Certificate. He led several projects making client, website, and platform accessible and WCAG compliant. And today, he's training the next generation of testers. He believes accessibility is a basic human right that's vital for some, enabling people to do what the rest of the world take for granted. This mission is simple: open accessibility testing to everyone, not just specialists. So welcome, Ady.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, I always, as I mentioned before we started recording, I never call myself an accessibility expert. I call myself an advocate because I know I don't know everything. But the more I got into accessibility, the more I found I seem to know more than most people in the room. So that's what got me into advocating for it, talking about it, and hence coming on things like this.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so thank you for being here as well. I appreciate that. Just as I said also, I just wanted to have some insight because not everybody is know everything about accessibility, and the goal is just to learn what you've been doing for. So thank you for that, for your time. Looking forward to get started. So today's agenda is pretty much simple. We're going to talk about you, your journey into testing and accessibility. Then we're going to discuss the common problem you see in the web dev industry. After that, we're going to talk about accessibility, what it is, why it's important, and how to implement it in the good way from the start. And after that, we'll conclude with the future of testing and if you have some career advice. So without further ado, we can get started. First of all, can you walk us through your journey and how you got into testing in the first place?
Yeah, so as you can see, I'm quite an older chap. I've just had my 60th birthday and I've been in testing 20 years. So I did quite a lot before that. I didn't get into technology till I was 37 years old. So I've done lots of things before that, from a wagon driver to running a warehouse to being a logistics director. And I'm also a trained auditor. So the audit skills have sort of helped me throughout my testing career. But the way I sort of got into testing was I was working in a bank. And they had a really big system update. And as I was running a department, they asked me to test the update. And I said, well, what do you mean test it? And they said, well, just make sure it works. And I said, well, under what criteria? You know, you're changing something, so it's going to work differently. So how do I know it? And I couldn't get any answers. I couldn't get any sense out of people. I didn't I couldn't get any criteria or direction. So I went to Google at the time, which was my local library. And I asked them if they had any books on software testing. Apparently there were only two. And one of them they couldn't find, I think. The one they did find was called The Art of Testing by Glenford J. Myers, which was written in 1979. Now, bear in mind, 1979, the 2003 technology had come a long way. So I wasn't holding a lot of hopes for this book. So I went to the library on Saturday morning. I'd finished reading the book by Sunday night. And I've just found the whole subject fascinating about investigating software and how it should work and all this different stuff and how to approach it. And I took so much away from that book. I came back to work. I tested the way it was explained in the book. I investigated things. I recorded all my details. I put everything in the test report. I sent it off to the test manager. And then I got called into the test manager's office. And I genuinely thought I was in trouble. I'd done something wrong or whatever. And the first question he asked me before I'd even sat down was, where have you worked as a software tester? And I said, well, I haven't worked as a software tester. I don't know what you're going on about. And he basically said, well, this report you've given me. I went, yeah. How did you know how to do this report? I said, well, I went to the library and I got a book and I read it and that's how it said to do the thing. And he went, what, you read a book? And then he told you to do that? And I went, yeah. And he went, this is better than half the testers I've got working for me. Do you want a job? And I went, oh, I don't know. What's the money like? And he went, well, it's tech. It's going to be better than whatever you're on. So I went, more money? That sounds good to me. I'll have some more money, please. So that was how I got into testing. That was like I said, that was 2003. The time it was very, very traditional testing. We were using spreadsheets for everything. We were siloed team. We were away from the developers, and I'm always a chatty person. I always like discussing things. At one point, I actually got disciplined for talking to a developer, and this is a direct quote at the time, wasting their valuable time by talking to them. That's a whole other story. But fast forward to it's going to be what 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, and the company was having their first customer-facing web browser application, and I was picked to go on the team because I was active in the test community and I was like constantly learning things and stuff. And they said, "You're the best place out of all the testers to take on this new project that nobody's done before." And when we got into the requirements of it and the clients that wanted to build this customer facing website, one of the things they mentioned was WCAG, which at the time I had no idea what that acronym meant. WCAG. I soon learned it was the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And at the time, I think it not long been upgraded to 2.0. So I didn't know about 1.0. So 2.0 was my starting point. And it had to be WCAG compliant. So I was tasked with understanding what that meant to not only how we tested the application, but also how we built the application when we need to be doing things early and things like that. So I started researching into it, and the more I read about digital accessibility and the guidelines and what we needed to do and how it was applied, there was just so much common sense about, having decent contrast, having a logical order and having like headings set out like you would in a document on a web page, and making sure all the orders was correct. Just so much common sense to it that just not occurred to me. I'd not thought about how anybody else used the system. I was essentially up to that point, all my testing was done for myself because I was the one testing it. So it was, can I use it? It wasn't, can everybody use it? And can people use it in different ways? So there's just, like I said, there's just so much common sense into this. It just fascinated me, and I just wanted to keep on learning. And the more I learned, and the more places I went, and conferences I went to, I started asking people about, do they know anything about accessibility or where can I learn and things like that. Just there weren't that many people talking about it at the time. So I thought, well, I know a little bit. I'll share the little bit I have. And I started doing talks about accessibility assumptions, common myths, the arguments you can have with stakeholders about why accessibility is important. And it just sort of went from there. I've done days training, like you said, audit testing days. I've gone into companies and spent a day training them. I have a very popular, basically one-page accessibility quiz, and it's got 10 images on a page. There are 11 questions to answer. And the first question is, what's wrong with the image in terms of accessibility? And there's lots of different answers to each one as you go through. And the last one is, what's wrong with the quiz itself? And that's because the number order of the thing are all out of logic, and there's no number 7 and there's 2 number 5s. So the logical order of the quiz that's out. And that's a metaphor for heading levels on a page and logical tabbing order and things like that. So I try to educate people in different ways. Like you said, I've put simple tests that different people should learn. It's literally a step-by-step journey of how to go through a web page. Just starting with skip to links. If you've got a menu at the top of your page, like lots of applications do, can you skip to the main content? It's literally 1 or 2 tabs on your keyboard. It's literally the simplest accessibility test you can do is refresh your page, tab a couple of times. Is there a skip link? I've even written, because I got sick of seeing the top 6 issues on the WebAIM Million Page Challenge. And WebAIM stands for Web Accessibility in Mind. So it's Web AIM as an acronym. They're the people behind the free screen reader NVDA. They're the people behind the free tool Wave, which is the Web Accessibility Evaluation tool. And they do all that for free. It's a completely non-profit. And they basically scan the top 1,000,000 web pages in the world, ranked by Google, with their tool and capture all the accessibility issues. The average accessibility issues with their tool on the page is about 64. And the top 6 ones haven't changed since I started doing it like 6 years ago. And it's really simple stuff like contrast, no language, denoted on a page, tabbing orders, heading levels. It's all the really basic building blocks of a web page. They have accessibility issues. So I basically wrote an article saying how to fix 90% of issues, because 90% of the issues were in these 6. And the other 10% were broken up with different things that the tool found. But 90% of it were in this thing. So there's an article out there that's free to read for everybody that basically how to fix 90% of accessibility problems on the web. So I've just found over the years just different ways to get information out there, different ways to educate people, and then having conversations like this that hopefully people listen to and they'll take things away from. Yeah, that's basically why I got into it, accessibility, because I found it fascinating. And sort of said this before, making things more accessible is my small contribution to making the world a little bit better for people.
And get it. And talking to many people, having workshops, what's the biggest misconception you heard when it comes to accessibility?
I'd say there's two main misconceptions. The first one is that accessibility is for a small number of users. Or they say, well, we don't have any blind users, or we don't have any users that can't use a mouse. And it's so annoying to me, because around 15% of the world's population have some form of a disability. There's a Paralympic movement called We the 15, which is all about raising awareness about the amount of people that have disabilities. It's the only group, the only demographic in the world that you can join either temporarily or permanently at any point in your life, at any given second in your life. And as you get older, the odds and likelihood of you joining the disabled community, the odds go up. So as your body goes, your eyes go, you have more chance of becoming disabled the older you get. And it's a demographic that only 8% of all disabled people are born disabled. They're through, whether it's accident, whether it's through illness, whether it's through a disease, a virus, lots of different things that can happen. That's how most of the people join the disabled community. So if you're doing accessibility, you're doing it for potential self that you could become, but you're also doing it for your future self who's getting older, whose brain might not be as quick as you get older, whose eyes are not as good as they get older, whose reaction times are not as good as they get older. So it's the only demographic you can join at any given point in your life. And it's 15% of the world's population. And the latest spending analysis, and they call it the purple dollar, the purple pound, or the purple economy. Obviously, I like purple. MOT likes purple. But the purple economy is the value of people with disabilities and people who care for or look after people with disabilities. And in the last analysis that they did on their spending power, it was $4 trillion annually. So if a company says, there's not that many disabled people out there, or we don't have any disabled users, it's potentially 15%, and 15% and a share of access to a $4 trillion demographic. So anybody who says, we don't have those users, or the people are probably not using our things, you're potentially getting rid of 15% of potential customers, and that's a lot of money off a bottom line for any given company. And I said the second one is perhaps the most simple one, which is images on a web page have the option of having alternative text, or alt text as it's shortened to. And people who don't understand digital accessibility think every image needs alternative text. That's the myth, that every image needs alternative text. And the truth is actually, it's the opposite way around. Images need a reason to have alternative text. Otherwise, they're just decorative. Like you go on a website and it's got a picture of a fields in the background, or it's got a vase of flowers, and they're just pretty pictures that are dotted around to make it look nice. It's design choices. You don't need to tell people they're there who are listening to it through a screen reader. Like, it's just noise. It's decorative. Like, I had an argument with the scientists once about alternative text on a graph, and how they go into great detail to put all these figures in their alternative text. And I went, so when you publish and you've pulled this graph, are all the numbers that you include in your alternative text on the page along with the data that goes with it? Well, of course, I share all the data because it's important that they understand where the data's come from to create these trends. And I said, well, when you put all those numbers on your alternative text, do you actually say what the trend is, where the lines are going, whether they're going up, whether they're going down, whether they're wiggling? Are you actually explaining what the chart is visually demonstrating to someone who can see it? Well, no, I just put the figures on it. I said, well, you're actually just giving someone with a screen reader a headache, announcing things to them twice. And I said, so number one, you don't need the figures on the chart. What you need is to explain a trend. But if you're doing that in the text under the graph, as you will see, this chart shows an upward trend in this data, giving us reasons why this thing is happening. I said, do you explain all that before you actually get to the data and like analyze and explain what the chart's telling you and the impact on it? It says, well, yeah, of course, you have to have an introduction about what the trends are and stuff like that. So basically, you're telling me everything this chart is visually giving you is in text. I went, yeah. And I said, so your chart doesn't need alternative text then, because everything, someone who can't see it, everything that's telling them is accessible on the page and written and explained. And this guy, look, that buffering face you get on the
Yeah.
little and things where people are going like buffering. His face buffered for a good 30 seconds. So this information was sort of going into his brain, and he just went, "You've saved me literally hours of work because I make sure all my charts when I publish them have all the information on it, and I'm rewriting that information in a way that I think it should be done. So I'm basically they were basically writing their article twice. Once as alternative text for a graph, and once as the actual article and the information. And he's like, you just saved me hours. I need to tell everybody in the scientific community this. I'll be on our chat forums in the morning telling them, hey, you don't need to write all this alternative text on your thing as long as it's all explained in the thing. And he said, so we ended up contacting him. He was pinging me questions about accessibility in the scientific community. It was fairly constant. It was like every week for the first few months. But he still pings me at Christmas he goes, he sent me, he once sent me this little graph about how much time my conversation with him had saved him over the last 6 years or something. It was very funny.
Yeah. I know.
It was hilarious. But
And
yeah,
it's-
you don't need alternative text if all the information about the image is in the text of the page of the document. There was a guy crying his heart out to people on the Ministry of Testing, which it used to be the club. You have conversations in different places now. There used to be this club site where people could post problems and the community would help answer them. And he basically said he needed a way to systematically check 3,000 images had alternative text. So I got the text conversation with him saying, well, why do you need to check 3,000? What is it? What is the page? What is the images that it's showing? And it was batteries. And I said, well, is the size of the battery and all the information about it written in the product spec? They went, yeah, of course it is. And I went, well, why do you need alt text for your battery? Someone who can't see the battery won't care whether it's black and gold or whether it's red and silver or whether it's yellow and green. I just want to know they've got the right size battery. So actually, you need to check that none of them are alternative text. And then you're going to save people who are using screen readers a load of time listening to something that they're going to read about 10, 15 seconds later. So that was another fellow who was really thankful for saving him a ton of time. So he literally thought he'd have to work through 3,000 images and add alternative text, like typing one at a time on all these different things.
Yeah, that's common sense. And what do you say who people believe that accessibility testing or implementing accessibility is very expensive?
Tabbing is not an expensive thing to do. Running a color contrast checker is not an expensive thing to do. Designing something isn't accessible is a lot more expensive than designing something that is accessible. So there's a lot of talk about shift left, and it's got its pros and it's got its cons. I personally think that shifting process left isn't everything as a fix. You need to shift thinking and culture left. So it's, designing to be performant, accessible and secure from the start is 100 times cheaper than trying to fix things after the fact. Fixing software after the fact is a pain in the bum. You have to deconstruct loads of lines of code. You have to find areas to change. You have to move architecture around, maybe. But if you start off with an accessible design and follow that through, then you don't need any accessibility testing other than I'm running a tool. I personally recommend if somebody's using an accessibility tool, run at least 2, probably 3, because they all give you they all check slightly different things in slightly different ways and give you slightly different answers. And there's more false positive come from automated tools than there is actual findings. So you have to be able to understand those, which is why I always recommend Wave as a starting point. If people want to get into a bit of accessibility testing, install the Wave extension, run it on a web page, start understanding the things it's showing you, because the Wave tool explains what the problem is and why it's important. And it tells you the guideline that you can go to read that it's infringing on or that it might be breaking. So the Wave tool is one of the best ones in terms of giving you feedback and making it understandable and more actionable. But I always run 2 or 3 tools. If I'm working for a client and it's one I'm not paid to do, because I do help charities from time to time, I assess the websites for them, and I do that for free. If it's a free one like that, I actually run 4 tools. So I'll use all 4 tools to create the feedback and show them how to fix things and how to change things. And it's like, especially with color contrast, it's a little bit of tweaking here and there. So if you remember, I said I got into this because a bank was creating a customer-facing thing. We had 37 clients. And out of those 37 clients, over 20 of them, their brand choices created bad color contrast on the elements and the tools. So they're like the button colors, like they wanted white text with orange, and it was hard to see the white text. So I had long conversations like, well, in these cases, you need to use black text if you're using that and stuff like that. But sometimes I got so fed up with this, trying to get him to, brand colours are sacred. You can't change brand colours. That's like our identity. That's how will people know it's not us. So I sneakily started moving things a couple of shades away from each other to see if anybody noticed, because a couple of shades away in a lot of cases was enough for it to reach the bottom level of colour contrast acceptance. And literally not one single client, I did this to maybe 16 or 17. I've left the company a long time ago, and so I don't think I'll get into trouble saying this out loud. But I did this to about 16, 17, and I didn't get a single pushback. I didn't get a single complaint. Nobody ever noticed. So brand colours are not sacred. You can move them a little bit either way, away from each other, where the contrast is too close to be able to see easily. And it's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you say for tester who are scared to get started on accessibility and think they have to be an expert to be a great tester?
So accessibility testing is not an exact science, because if you test for something and give feedback, you can make something as accessible as possible for a group of people. And that might make a different group of people struggle more. And I'll give you a perfect example of it. When I'm doing training, one of the things I like to do early doors is, which do you think is best for accessibility, light mode or dark mode? Now, generally, there's about a 70-30 tilt towards dark mode, because everybody thinks light mode come first. And then we invented dark mode later on. When actually, if you look at the earliest computer screens, it was actually, we're all in dark mode because we had black screens with green characters and text on them. So we actually started with dark mode, the web invented light mode, and then we went, oh, dark mode's a thing again. The actual answer is it's about 50-50, because in any demographic, half the people have what's called an astigmatism. And an astigmatism means that if they're looking at white things on a dark page, it actually hurts their eyes more than looking at, black text on a white background or a 5% grey background or whatever background, a lighter background with black text. So it's 50-50. So the thing about digital accessibility is give people choice. Like if they want to use a tool to make the page different for them to view it, don't get in the way of it, don't block it. Have light and dark mode. Just make sure your contrast is good on both of them. And if you want to get into accessibility testing, just start with the most simplest stuff. Start with the keyboard. The keyboard is the foundation for digital accessibility, because every tool and every assistive technology relies on the keyboard to navigate a page. If you can't use your mouse, you're doing everything with a keyboard. I actually learned to type on computers before mice were invented. That's how old I am. That's how long I've been using computers. So I was a touch typist. I used every keyboard shortcut there was going to navigate around pages. And then when you do that, people go, "How have you managed to do that without your mouse?" and stuff. And it's like just basic keyboard things, basic navigation with your keyboard. But that's the foundation of digital accessibility. So start with the keyboard. Some people call it the no mouse challenge, where just do whatever you're going to do that day. But as you start testing, put your mouse in your drawer or move it away from you and do all your tests just using the keyboard. If you can complete all your tests using the keyboard, guess what? You've just tested for keyboard accessibility and it's passed. If you get stuck or you get to somewhere you can't get out of or navigate back from, guess what? You found an accessibility bug. You've found a keyboard trap. Or if you're tabbing through and you can't see where you are on the screen, you've found a visual indicator accessibility bug. So that's one of the ones in the simple tests, like just tab through a page, tab 10 times. Can you see where you are? Can you identify where you are on the page still? Is there a bold outline on some element or whatever? If the answer is no, you haven't got decent visual indicators of where you are on the page. So it is accessibility on some levels is just so simple. On other levels, it's really complicated. But I would argue, take pretty much any discipline in software development and testing, you could make the same argument. Security testing, it's very elemental. Well, actually, no, I can paste in cross-site script and do some security testing. I can manipulate a URL and do some security testing. I can go on the dev tools and I can dig into what's underneath the page and I can see if I can find any vulnerabilities or information that they shouldn't be giving away. URLs can give information away that really shouldn't be given away, that will tell you exactly what tool to use to hack into it. Like, sites are getting so much better about not revealing the URL, but guess what? There's still a lot of information in dev tools hidden underneath the UI. Is that simple security testing? If you're just having to dig them out in developer tools, or you're manipulating the URL, or you put in a very basic cross-site script. One of the things I do is I'm an editor for articles for the Ministry Testing. I also do it for the Wonder Proxy blog. And there was a bug story article recently about someone who'd literally just put /admin at the end of a URL and got straight into admin capabilities and could have literally destroyed a site, deleted all the information just by typing /admin. And that's because someone all along the process had not thought to put a block on that. You could get to it by logging in and signing in with security details, and it will pop up /admin, but nobody had checked. If you didn't bother signing in, you could still get there. And that is a genuine thing. I found one of those bugs. Essentially, it was in a 2-factor process. I could get to the second page without the first part, and because the first part hadn't been completed, I could just hit enter, and it didn't process any information on that page because it wasn't holding that information, which you would find from the first part of the login. So I could literally just type my way to the second part of the 2-factor authentication, right? Hit enter, and then get into somebody's account. So am I a security expert? Absolutely not. Like, it's one of my weakest areas is security. In my generalist setup that I have, I try and learn a bit about everything. But yeah, I would highly recommend people try accessibility testing, try security testing, find out about performance testing, learn about observability and monitorability and the difference between them, like the two sides of a coin. But don't be scared just because it's got a perception of you have to be an expert to do certain things. You have to be an expert to do deep testing in anything. There are performance specialists out there, there are security specialists out there, there are accessibility specialists out there to do really deep testing. That's what we want those specialists to be doing. We don't want them to find all the low-hanging fruit that any tester can find if they just take the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. So now we talk about the different problems. Just to make sure we're on the same page, can you define what is a website, what is an accessible website, and what does it mean also?
Yeah. So I'm not sure I can define it. I can tell you what attributes an accessible web page would add. It would basically be, it would have good contrast. It would have an easy to interact with design. It would have the language that was written on the page or the information it was sharing would be readable. It would have a low readability age to it. It would be simple to interact with. It would be intuitive to interact with. It would work on a multitude of devices and sizes, and the order and logical order of the way you navigate it through the page wouldn't change if you're on a little mobile device or a really wide screen. Because I don't know about you, I've got two really wide screens either side of me. So it doesn't matter if it's like 2 foot wide or if it's 6 inches wide on a screen, the page lays out. So good responsive design built in from the beginning, mobile first and that sort of stuff. And it doesn't hinder the person who's using it, no matter how they're interacting with it. So whether they're using a keyboard and mouse, whether they're just using a keyboard, whether they're using a screen reader, whether they're using swipes and taps on a phone. So when you put a phone into screen reader mode, the screen becomes a tracking pad, and different finger gestures like swipes, taps, whether you're using 1, 2, 3 or 4 fingers, depending on all these different gestures you can use, that's how you navigate through a page. So swiping in a J like that is like control tab to the bottom of the page on a keyboard. So different swipes equate to keyboard shortcuts, which is again why I said that keyboard is the foundation of digital accessibility, because it's these keyboard shortcuts translate to gestures on a phone, on a tracking pad or an iPad or whatever digital device you're using. So, yeah, having good keyboard accessibility, having logical orders, having your heading levels, again, in a logical order, good contrast, simple to interact with and use design. All these are good traits of a good accessible site. In the UK, the BBC is probably one of the best ones at having a good accessible site and also giving information about accessibility out to the community. The BBC is one of the largest organisations in the country that holds meetups for accessibility testing and things like that. So that's a good example in the UK of a website that has good accessible design. So yeah, there's an example for you.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. We'll definitely check that. So we know what is accessibility. We know it's important in terms of business, but you also said it's a basic human right. Can you explain that?
So access in general to anything, it should be a basic access to goods and services, access to clean water. It's the same. It's similar digitally as physically. So if a person in a wheelchair goes to a bank and there's no ramp to get to the front door, there's just a set of steps, they don't have access. It's their bank, they've got their money, but they can't physically access it. If somebody is using only keyboard and they go to their bank's website and it's not keyboard navigable, you can't get to everything to sign in or access every service on the page with just keyboard, it's the same as having steps and no ramp. It's the same level. You're denying somebody access to services. It's like one of the examples I use in talks, and I've had people have had arguments with me this, saying they're not like that, but they were, and I don't like falling out with people. But I say to them, would you ever be the person on the door of a club or a bar or something like that, and if you see someone in a wheelchair, say, "Sorry, you're not coming in. We don't have a way of getting you in, or we're not letting you in because you're in a wheelchair. You'll take up too much space." Or a gay couple behind them holding hands, would you deny them coming in because they're gay? If you are aware of digital accessibility and you choose to do nothing about it, you don't test for it, you don't advocate for it, you don't say, Why are we not following the web content accessibility guidelines when we're making this? If you are aware and do nothing, you're the person at the door saying, no, you can't come in. So that's why I say it's a human right. And that's not my term. That's the UN, the United Nations in 2016, I think it was, put out a non-binding resolution that said digital accessibility was a human right. Tim Berners-Lee, who is the most commonly credited with creating the World Wide Web, the interconnected set of machines and internet that we use today, one of the first things he said about it was it needs to be able to be used by everybody, no matter how they interact with it. That was one of the foundation blocks of the web. And the more technology has changed and the more complicated things have become, the less accessible it's getting. The Web A Million survey has actually, things were improving. Like it started off at 99% of websites had accessibility problems, and over 6 years it slowly come down. It was 94.7, I think. So it's not come down a lot, but it's trending downwards. And for the first time, the last one went back up again. And I have a theory that it's because of people creating websites quicker through using AI, and AI has not been told to consider accessibility. It might have been told to consider lots of things, but the AI accessibility wasn't in the AI requirements. So yeah, I think AI is making accessibility worse, but the information's out there. How to test for everything's out there, and I've put a load of stuff out. Other people have a load of stuff out. If you're working with documents and PDFs, there's a guy on YouTube called the PDF Accessibility Guy. He literally runs you through everything you need to know to make accessible PDF. All the information's out there. It's 2026. A lot of this information has been out there for over a decade now. All you have to do is go and find it and then action it. Like I say, it's 15% of the world's population. We can't ignore people. We have to make websites and applications and systems accessible to as many people as possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And throughout your career, you've been working on many websites, working on making them accessible, for example, WCAG compliant. Can you tell us about that?
So in my work, when I first started getting into digital accessibility, one of the ways you can test is called a VPAT, VPAT, which is voluntary product accessibility template that you fill in, and it works through all the web content accessibility guidelines. So I basically, through working, taught myself to be an accessibility auditor and to create these VPATs. So I've created and audited websites at companies I've worked at, but I've also done it under contract for different companies. So I've come in and audited their site, created a VPAT for them, and then educated them on how to approach it, what the biggest risks are, what the biggest impacts are. Taught them, I've done workshops testing for accessibility. But it's not a skill that took me years to learn. It was something that once you understand the concept of the different ways to test for him, and to be honest, one of the main feedbacks I give to people about accessibility testing is when you work your way through the web content accessibility guidelines, visual inspection is probably the two words that come up more than any other, because it's very hard to programmatically check that a visual indicator has enough contrast and is big enough to see on a mobile device on a desktop. So you can say there is a visual indicator because it's in the code, but it's not going to give you any information about whether it's good enough and whether it works. So learning to do a VPAT and become an accessibility auditor is something you can teach yourself, and it doesn't take years. It takes a few months. Because I basically, because work were encouraging me to learn what I could learn about accessibility, I had one day a week where I concentrated on learning for accessibility, and I didn't go to meetings, I wasn't doing anything else. It was my dedicated learning time. And every time I learned things, I fed it back to the team and I educated them, and I did training with the team. So it was the whole team was learning it. I was just leading it. But yeah, I taught myself to become an accessibility auditor so I could like reassess the site. Like basically you're supposed to have a VPAT annually. I taught myself to be that tool because the basically they weren't sure about whether they had the budget to pay a company £80,000 to do it. So they said, Ady, how do you feel about doing it? I said, yeah, I'll take your 80 grand. I went, no, you just do it as part of your job. I have an extra money. And I went, oh, all right. And I said, I think it'll be a really good skill to learn because it's transferable and it'll help the project and it'll help the budget. So yeah, I'll leave it with me. I'll learn to do it. So I negotiated this 1 day a week to learn. So it took me maybe 1 day a week, 3 months tops to learn how to complete a VPAT and how to audit a website to fill it in. So this is not unattainable. It's not something that's going to take you years to learn to get to the basic level of an accessibility auditor. To go really deep and understand the code behind it and how to do all the fixes and stuff, that's a years and years long journey. Like I can identify a lot of accessibility things that I couldn't go into the code and show someone how to fix because I'm not the best coder in the world. Code's never really interested me. I God bless people who like to code, but it's never been me. I just find it so boring. Like if I wanted to learn another language, it'd probably be Klingon. For the Star Trek fans out there. But I would invest more time in learning Klingon than I would learn code. And I learned to read code. I thought it was an important skill as a tester to be able to read code so I could understand logic patterns and I could understand object-oriented programming. I could understand the construct and where key elements were used and when they recalled elements and all these sorts of different things about code. So I could sit down and I could pair with developers when they were creating something and I could ask them questions. I could say, have you thought about this? And I can see the logic you're using there, but have you considered something here? When they're actually creating the work. So I can read code, but for the life of me, I wouldn't like to sit down and write code. Like this AI can write code. AI can write crap code and then somebody who's really good can fix it. But yeah, I'm not one for coding, but learning to audit websites, yeah, that is definitely something anybody can pick up. But don't start with that as a goal. Start learning some basic accessibility tests. And like I said, there's lots of resources out there. I've got some as well. Just search my name.
Yeah.
And you'll find quite a few things, especially linked. I've got a website, and but a lot of my things are on the Ministry of Testing because I've been with the Ministry of Testing for, I don't know, as long as I can remember.
And
Pre-2008.
2009. The favorite tools you're using, are you more into manual testing, automation testing, or any special tools?
I will point out, I don't like the term manual testing. Automated testing, automated is the differentiator from testing. So I just test. I don't manual test, I just test. But with accessibility, there's maybe, like some people will say about 57% of automated tests can be automated. Other people will tell you it's as low as 35%. What I do know is there's a lot of accessibility tests you have to physically do yourself because the thing interacts with a human being. And you can't programmatically tell whether, like you can have good contrast on a visual indicator, like I said, but only a person can tell you if it's large enough to be seen on lots of different screens. Because programmatically, using automation, it would only tell you it's there. It wouldn't tell you it's good enough. Like contrast will tell you it fails, and it would say that's a fail, but it wouldn't tell you if it only fails by a little bit or it fails by a lot. So there is a website out there, and I've forgotten off the top of my head the name. If you go to this website, all you see is a perfectly black screen. All the elements are in black, all the text is in black, all the keys are in black, all the typing on the keys are in black. You can actually see what's going on if you highlight the whole page and use your highlight as a contrast way to see what's there. But if you put that in Lighthouse, it tells you that's 100% accessibility pass. And all it is black. You can't see anything. You can't properly do anything because you don't know where you are visually on the page. But Lighthouse gives it 100% score for accessibility. So yeah, automation can do some things, and I'm sure that there will be AI tools that will push the boundaries of what automation can do in the future. But it's never ever going to replace a human being interacting and getting feedback. And I'll give you an example. There was a website in Australia that got sued because of its shopping experience for somebody using a keyboard. And the example the person gave was, if I put something in my shopping cart and then try to pay for it, it takes me 130 odd tabs to get from putting it in my shopping cart back to the cart, because the cart was on the top right hand side of the page. And when you put it in the cart, the only thing you could do was go back to the main page, because they were expecting somebody to click back on the cart to check out. But when you did it with the keyboard, it took them back to the main. You had to go back. It took you back to the main page, and you had to go all the way down the page several times to get all the way to the end to get to the bit where the cart was. Over 130 times. That passes Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That is a pass of WCAG. That would be a tick in a box. But is it usable? Is it a good customer experience to make them tab 130 times? No. Would an automated test tell you you have to tab 130 times? No. So automation couldn't find something like that.
And for somebody who is interested in getting started, like what training do you recommend them to take? For example, instead of certifications or courses, for example, and blogs?
It depends on how far you want to take it. Me personally, I'm a generalist. I like learning enough about something to know when I need an expert. So like monitoring and observability, security, like I said, security is one of my weaker points. But I can test for security. I can run security tools. I can do other things. I can find low-hanging security things. I encourage everybody to find low-hanging anything, any area of testing. If you really want to get into becoming an accessibility specialist, there is a main body, which is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP. You can become an associate of theirs. They do lots of different training. It is expensive, but there are lots of courses out there that will teach you the basics of accessibility and the basics of accessibility testing that are a lot cheaper. And there are even ones out there that are free. So places like WebAIM has a lot of information and learning you can take away from there for free. DQ, which is DQUE, has a DQ University where they have different courses and stuff that's free. I'd recommend looking at those. But yeah, there is training. There is training out there. There are places you can go to get information. If you're a pro member of the Ministry of Testing, there's a accessibility basics course you can get there, but you have to be a pro member, and that has an annual cost, which is, as an ambassador, I need to say it's a very reasonable cost, because as a pro member, you get thousands of talks, you get loads of courses on different subjects. There's lots of accessibility content. I curate the accessibility collection on the Ministry of Testing, but again, that is paid for. There are free options out there. Some of the stuff on the Ministry of Testing are free to read. I believe my articles are free to read. I have done a masterclass on simple tests every tester should know, but I think that's behind a paywall. I'm pretty sure that's behind a paywall. But I have done conversations about it. There's the article that's available to read. And if people want to find me on LinkedIn and ask me questions about accessibility, I get them every week. I get people asking me questions every week. Like you came and asked me a question about accessibility. Do you want to talk about it on a podcast? I think you were one of maybe 4 people that day who sent me a question on accessibility, or wanted me to point them to something, or how do I approach this or that. So I get questions every week. So a few more. I'll find the time to respond. It might not be immediately, but I always respond.
Okay, and you're also training testers into accessibility via apprenticeship partnership or initiative. Can you talk about that as well?
Well, I'm not specifically training for accessibility, and that isn't my job anymore. Basically, my best mate and my Padawan learner, someone I taught, got into testing by telling them, "You are going to be a tester," and they didn't really have a choice. Scott Kenya, He oversees the training of about 80% of the UK's software testing apprentices, and he makes sure that awareness of accessibility and the basics of accessibility is part of that course. I worked with a company called the Coders Guild on creating their apprenticeship, and I made sure that accessibility was a part of that program as well. So I'm always pushing accessibility awareness. I'm more in, and with the certificates in the Ministry of Testing, that's the Software Testing Essentials course. Accessibility is absolutely part of that course, but it's about becoming a software tester. It's about thinking like a tester thinks. It's about understanding what continuous growth and continuous learning is, that you can set that through the rest of your career once you finish your certificate. So yeah, I've got into teaching testers. 2018 was when I first met Crispin, and he talked about creating the Coders Guild to help underrepresented people get into coding and get into tech that way. And I said it'd be cool if we could do a similar thing with software testers and get underrepresented groups into software testing. So we started working on that in 2018. We were moving forward in 2019. We were getting things into place. COVID struck in 2020 and brought everything to a screeching halt. And then at the end of 2020, Crispin got a contract to help people who were on what in the UK we called deferment, I think it was, where basically they couldn't go to work, but they were paid 80% of the salary by the government. And it was to retrain them to get something they could do remotely, like software testing. So the Coders Guild, through myself and a group of people that I pulled together, created the UK's first software testing boot camp that was part of government training to get people into different professions. And then from there, when COVID settled down and we got the apprenticeship back up and running, I used some of that content in the apprenticeship. And then we started training software testers. Initially, for about the first year, I was doing the training until we got the training up to the standard it should be, and we had all the training notes and materials and things ready. And then basically I passed that on to somebody else. But then because I'd created an apprenticeship concept and the bootcamp concept and trained testers, the Ministry of Testing asked me to help oversee the certificates and curate them. Basically, I reviewed everything that's in the certificates. I've reviewed every word. I've watched everything. I've written quite a lot for it as well myself to train. But yeah, I was the curator of it. I was making sure everything followed through. So like if we're on lesson 7 and it starts talking about things we talked about in module 3, that we were consistent in what we were saying in both modules and things like that. So yeah, so like training testers wasn't something that I ever thought I would do or ever thought I would be qualified enough or have enough knowledge to do. But that one of the great things about becoming a generalist over the course of my, like you said, 20 whatever it is, I think 2028 is 25, so 23 years in software testing now. Becoming a generalist, I have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge to share, and learning how to teach it and learning how to create teaching content was just another skill that I've added to my generalist portfolio over the years. Yeah, and it all started with, like I mentioned Scott Kenyon before. I told him he was going to be a tester. He was brought in as a junior. Like we interviewed him, we got him in as a junior tester, and then I had to teach him testing. So that made me think about what I had to refine my definition of what software testing is, how I approach it. So I was teaching him how to think as a tester, what quality was, and how it was context dependent and things like that. And a lot of the ways I taught Scott, I learned a lot of lessons from teaching Scott and how to refine things for different people and different learning needs and stuff. And that followed through when I started teaching, creating content to teach a wider group of people. So it started off there, and it helped that I've got a coaching background. So I'm a qualified cricket coach, and I coached junior teams for years and coached senior players. So like I had 40 odd years in and around playing cricket, coaching, umpiring. I'm having my second run as a club chairman now. The club are in a bit of trouble. They asked me to come back and help them shape the future and stuff. So having a coaching background helped me like educate and teach, and because they're all intertwined. So yeah, that's
Okay.
basically how I got into teaching.
Okay, we are close to the end of this interview. Just a couple more questions. First, how do you see the role of testers evolving over the next year, especially with AI?
I think the role of tester, I don't think it changes. I think the focus of what we do is going to be more on critical thinking and evaluation of AI output rather than just physically testing software, looking for bugs and stuff like that. And I also think we're going to get more involved in thinking what we put into AI. Like prompt engineering is one of the new buzzwords, and like creating prompts, and you have this role and stuff. But crafting prompts that have enough context and information to give you a better output is something testers is. So we are thought workers as testers. Our job is to think. People think, oh, it's to bash keyboards and manipulate software and try different things and different tests. That is an output of the thinking we put in, and the quality of thinking we put in is the quality of the output of our tests and the system we help create. So I think a lot more focus is going to be on testers as thinkers and as critical analysts, and applying our thought and applying our evaluation skills to what we put into AI and what comes out of AI. And you can see that in the comments that developers are having AI write code, and then they're having to go through and critically think about the logic being used and things like that and correct it. And quite often they don't correct it by correcting the code. They correct it by giving more instructions to the AI and giving more rounded prompts about what output they want. And becoming more, instead of saying, create me a website, they say, create me a template and make sure that's right. And then they build on that. And then they add and they add. And it's like iterative software development, but using AI to do it. And every time you do something and create some value, you then critically assess what that value is, what it needs to move it forward next. And it's all about the thinking we apply. So I think the future for testers is applying that critical thinking and applying our brains, which is why I'm researching a book on thinking in software testing. In a world of AI, where AI has all the answers, we need to keep learning and keep asking questions and keep analysing the output and making sure that AI slop in terms of the software and the websites and anything that comes out of AI is critically analysed and evaluated to make sure rubbish isn't getting through. It makes stuff up. AI hallucinates. AI does all sorts of things, and we need to be able to understand that, and we need to be able to assess it, and we need to be able to do all that. We need to be able to think clearly and critically.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was my last question. Anything you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
The future of accessibility is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are going to get a big update probably sometime in the next year or two. And when it moves to WCAG 3.0, it's going to be a completely different setup. Instead of being pass and fail, you'll get a ranking score. So you could have an 80% accessible website, and they're going to have bronze, silver and gold levels. And for bronze, the idea is that bronze is, you'll be able to meet bronze through automation. You'll be able to check everything with automation at the bronze level. And then you'll need humans to evaluate for the silver and the gold levels. So that's going to be a big change to accessibility going forward. I'd encourage people who are interested in accessibility to go on to w3.org and look at the WCAG 3.0 Project Silver update, as it was when it first started. So I'd encourage people to look at that, because that new standard also brings in things like cognitive walkthroughs on websites, and getting proper feedback from actual disabled users. So there is quite a lot of changes there. If people are getting interested, I'd definitely have a look at that. And it also expands on cognitive and learning disabilities as well as augmented reality. So it's like, it is bringing it closer to the future and the reality of what we have now. And in terms of career advice, I would encourage everybody to just spread the wings a little bit. Don't try and learn everything at once, but create an order of learning for yourself. Like I say, I'm a strong believer in generalism. And like one of the expressions I call it is, if you think of a comb that's broken, so you have lots of strands on a comb and some of them are at different depths and levels if they're broken. So it all stems from the T-shaped tester So you know what testing is, and you've got deep knowledge in one area. The pie-shaped tester where you've got deep knowledge in two areas. Well, I think as we move into the AI world, we need to be even wider than that. We need more strings to our bow. We need more generalist learning, and you can create your own learning path by deciding what subjects you want to learn and to what level you want to learn them. But I'd encourage everybody to at least become a novice level in as many different testing disciplines as you can, because the wider your depth of knowledge and the wider your breadth of knowledge, it gives you something to build on depth-wise, so you can expand outwards and you can expand down. And I think Stuart Day, I think he called it testers as trees. You have all these branches and leaves and all these different bits of knowledge and information you can get, and it grows year after year, does the tree, and gets bigger and wider. I've certainly got bigger and wider as I've got older, around the middle as well as in knowledge. But yeah, I would highly encourage everybody, just pick one subject and learn the basics. And then if you're really interested, then carry on and learn a bit more. But I'd encourage you to learn the basics of 3 and 4 different disciplines in a row, and then start applying it. Start doing those little things. And I would highly encourage you to start with accessibility. Start learning the basics, the simple tests that you can do. Put your mouse away, have them on no mouse challenge. Just do a little bit. And the more you learn, become an advocate. My job as an advocate is to create more advocates, people talking about accessibility, people asking questions about accessibility. So go out there, do a bit, learn a bit, ask questions. If you get it to me in a design meeting, say, have we done user journeys? Do we know what the user journey looks like? That's great. But what does the keyboard user journey look like? Have we mapped out tabbing orders? Have we mapped out where people might struggle with certain things because they're not using the mouse? Have we thought about the audio user journey? What is somebody with a screen reader going to hear? Do we need to embed more information into the process that someone who can't see the screen would not otherwise get? Do we need to add context around fields rather than just a title or a heading? So there are multiple types of user journeys, and if we get in a design conversation, we can ask those questions. I've done it. I've been in design conversations and asked those specific questions. And I've had designers look at me and go, not even thought about the audible journey. I've not even thought, I need to go away and I need to think about that and I need to do some research. I might need to call you in here and ask you questions. And it just builds knowledge up. And then next time that person's creating a flow from scratch, guess what they're going to do? They're going to think about the keyboard journey. They're going to think about the audio journey. You only have to have that conversation once and the seed's planted, and then they're becoming an advocate for accessibility as well. So hopefully people who hear this, they'll go away and become their own advocates.
Yeah, so thank you again, Ady. That was a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time to share your insight and also your knowledge about accessibility. For those interested, you're welcome. For those interested, I will share your link to your LinkedIn profile, to your Ministry of Testing profile also, and
Perfect.
your article, like sample test for accessibility, every tester should know. And I can add also any links we discussed in this episode.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
I've enjoyed that.
Thank you. So that concludes today's episode. I hope you found it valuable. If you did, please share it with your colleagues and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to learn from experts about how they test and how to become a better software tester. So I'm Amadou. Thank you again, Ady. This is how to test this, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.